Sergeant D'Esposito with the 141st Medical Company, the supply sergeant over here. And this is Sergeant Kucher. He's our mechanic with the 141st. Today you're going to be seeing a short video on some of the differences with our ambulances, some nice tips and tricks to help you guys as medics operating our ambulances, and ultimately the goal is to take care of our equipment and make sure that it stays in working condition and working order. I hope you enjoy this. Thank you.
All right, so here in the engine bay, most of you are pretty good at knowing what to look for. You know, you're obviously going to check your fluid levels here, which ain't really a big deal, but it's nice to have windshield washer fluid. You're going to check your oil here. You all know how to do that. It's very simple. You're going to look here at the master cylinder reservoir. It says max right here on the bottle. Make sure your fluid is at least, you know, close to that. Here on your power steering reservoir, as long as you see the red fluid inside that sight glass, you're good. Doesn't have to be full, just has to have red fluid inside. Your alternator, you're gonna check your wiring on your alternator, check your ground strap, make sure this hasn't broken or frayed or anything like that. You're gonna check your belts. On these ones, there's only one belt. Make sure it's still tight, which, you know, as long as the tensioner's doing its job, this belt will always be tight, but it doesn't hurt to grab it and give a little tug or whatever and make sure you can't move the belt too much. All right, over on this side of the engine, you got a few things. This is your transmission dipstick tube. This you check with the engine running in neutral, and with the, you know, the engine has to be hot, the transmission has to be at operating temperature when you check this. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good reading. You're going to look like either you don't have enough or you're going to look like you're over full, depending on the situation. Here we got our overflow can for the cooling system. It has a full line. And you're just going to make sure that you can see coolant up to the line there. But typically, as long as you see something in here, again, you're usually safe. It's when you don't see anything in there that there's problems. Reading your dipstick, obviously you see where it says full and you have the little hash marks. So as long as the oil is inside the little hash marks, technically you're all right. This one is pretty close to the bottom of the hash marks. And it tells you right there, if it's at the bottom of the hash marks, to add 1 quart, and that will bring you up to full. Once the transmission's running and everything's moving, it's pumping oil, that's gonna move the oil down to where it should be, which is down inside that tiny little hash mark area there. As long as the oil with the engine running and the transmission hot, as long as the oil is down inside that tiny little hash mark area there, that usually means you have enough transmission fluid in there so it'll operate properly. Few areas that definitely need to be focused on. Right up here on your front diff, you're going to want to shine a light up inside here. You're going to check the seals, the output seal for the diff on this side. There's another one up here on this side. You're going to look for any sign that gear oil is coming out, because that will need to be replaced immediately. Same thing with this output seal up, right up in there. That's the 3 seals to the diff. And then if you see any leaking here in the front cover, but this isn't as common as the diff seals actually leaking themselves. The other thing you're going to look at is you're going to look at your brake pads here. Both sides. If it starts to look thin, we definitely need to get those replaced. The other thing you're going to notice when you first climb underneath the truck here in front, you're going to see your radiator hoses. You're going to look up in front where it actually attaches to the radiator. See if you see any coolant running down the hose here. You got another hose clamp here where it meets with the metal line. So you look for coolant leaking there. So what you're going to look at here is your wheel hubs. You're going to grab this tie rod here. No, nothing's moving. It's all right if it rocks back and forth like that. It's a swivel joint. It's going to do it. Right up inside this seal right here, where this half shaft comes into the hub. You're gonna look for leaks, any sign of fluid leaking there. You're gonna look at this back cover down around the bottom here, see if there's any fluid leaking from there. The next part you're gonna check is you're gonna look at the side cover the best you can and see if there's anything leaking here. Now there's another seal that you're not gonna be able to see way up in the front here, but the best way to tell if that seal is leaking, you're gonna see a bunch of oil built up right down around here because gravity is gonna have it run all the way down here. It's gonna drip. All right, working our way back through the truck. You're gonna check all your universal joints on the drive shaft. As you see, there's several throughout the whole line. You're just gonna grab the drive shaft. This is okay, don't worry about that. You're looking for any other kind of movement other than twisting. There's gonna be a little play here because of this. This is all encased in rubber, so there's gonna be flex here. There's supposed to be flex there in order to dampen vibration, so. But other than that, you shouldn't feel any kind of play inside these caps here, because then that means needles are worn out, hasn't been greased properly, and it's going to eventually fail. Now look for any sign of anything leaking along the edge of the oil pan, and it's even a better chance to get a good look at some other parts of the engine from underneath. You got oil cooler lines here, you got exhaust manifold, which they do leak oil every now and then when the gasket starts to fail. You can look for any oil leaking around the filter housing, any damage to the filter itself. You see your fuel pump up here. Any kind of a fuel leak whatsoever, no matter how slight it is an automatic deadline. So you definitely want to pay attention to anything with fuel involved in it, because that will deadline a truck right away. We got our transmission pan gasket here. Same thing. You're checking the edge. You're looking for any sign of leaks, which this one's nice and dry. No problems here. You're gonna look at this particular hole right here. If you see any kind of fluid coming up and out of this hole here, that's a sign that something's wrong inside here. It's either a seal in the transmission or the remain seal for the engine. Something that'll need to be looked at. So any fluid out here definitely needs to be addressed. Next, we're going to cover the exhaust system. So here's your crossover pipe. Leads all the way up back to your muffler here. So you're just looking at all the seams. You see welds here. You see joints here. Any sign that anything is blowing by, it'll look black and sooty, showing that, you know, exhaust gases are blowing by. So that means that there's a seal in there that needs to be replaced, or if a weld would be failing, and then we'd have to replace the whole pipe. The common place for these to fail is right in here. This pipe will rust and rot to the point where it just falls right off of this. Another point where it likes to fail, again, is right here as well. Here's another joint. Again, you can see black soot wherever the seal was failing. We got our transfer case right here. What you're going to look at in the transfer case is you're going to look at right up in here. There's a seal behind this dust shield. So you're going to look for any transmission oil coming out of there. That means the seal will need to be replaced. Here on the back side of the transfer case, these are actually engine coolant that runs through these lines and helps keep the transfer case cool. So you're going to look for any green coming out of these hose clamps here on either end. That would indicate you probably have to take this clamp off and replace it with a traditional band clamp. Another seal here that tends to leak from time to time, so that's another area you need to keep a good close eye on. Fuel tank here, you're going to be looking for any signs of gases. Gas has been dripping and accumulating here because there's a big seal on the top of this tank, and what happens is a lot of guys overfill the fuel tank or whatever, and fuel ends up leaking out of that seal. It'll run down from the backside or it'll run down from the front, but it always pools up right around here. So you're going to look for fuel anywhere along the underside of this tank. Another thing that the 10 manual will tell you, it'll tell you to look for any signs that this drive shaft is rubbing against this protective shield here, because that means that something's out of adjustment, something needs to be repaired. All right, so back here in the patient compartment, we have the HVAC control box. You got your power on off for the entire system back here. So obviously right now we got the power turned on. You got your blower here. Turn that knob. You'll hear the blower turn up. We'll turn that down for now. Your fresh air door, that's far back corner here. That's more for the AC, which is your AC switches here on and off. Engine must be running obviously for your AC to work. Heater, you don't need anything else turned on other than this switch here. So to run the heater in this new style system, it's very simple. You hear a start. It does take a while, but you'll hear it spool up. It almost sounds like a passenger jet warming up before takeoff. All right, now that we're up and running, you can hear the sound of the diesel burner going. We got hot air blowing through this whole cab right now. Everything's working good. So now that we know that works, the proper way to turn this off, turn off the heater switch there. You'll hear the blowers die down, but you have to wait until this green light goes out before you shut off power to the main box. Next thing to check in here is the lights. You got your on and off here. Go down into blackout mode here. Make sure all your lights are working properly. And that is the bulk of what needs to be looked at in the back. Some of you guys will notice in your ambulances that you have a different style panel from the ones we just discussed. This is the old HVAC system versus obviously the one we already discussed would be the new system. So here's how to handle the old system, because we still have like 3 or 4 ambulances that have this style system in place. So in order to turn this system on, just slide this over to max heat, or in the summertime, max air. Top lever is going to be all the way over to heat. Fan you can have wherever you want. We'll keep that on low for now. Here is your heater switch. You'll see off, and then you'll see run and start to one side, and then you'll notice this light. So what you need to do to run this style system, you need to push it over to start, and you need to sit there and hold it. And you're going to hold it the entire time until that light kicks on. Once that light kicks on, you know you've got fire. And then once that light kicks on, you can flip the switch over to run, where it'll go constantly. As you can hear, the pitch has changed. You can hear the heater burning. The light is on. I'm in run now. So now you're going to get hot air blowing through the cab, and everything's going to get nice and toasty. And this one is just like the other one in the fact that you have to wait for this light to turn off before you turn off the rest of the panel. So now that we're done with the heat running, we're going to flip it to off. We have to wait for this light to stop before we turn this to unit off.